Okay, good morning everyone. Welcome to Cabinet on Friday, the 13th of September. As usual, the meeting is broadcast live via the County Council's website and archived so you can look at it afterwards. Members, please remember to switch the microphones on and off so people can hear you. Next item, apologies for absence. I have none, although Blake Payne is stuck in traffic due to some congestion on the M1 and is getting here as soon as he can. Next one is minutes. Pages 5 to 18. I move that the minutes of the meeting held on 25th of June 2019 are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Welcome, Blake. Urgent items. Item 2, there are none. Declarations of interest. Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. Personal interests, Member of Chelmsford Borough Council in item 8, reference to Quorn there, but I believe I can still speak and vote. Thank you, Chairman.
Very good. No others. Item 4, Leicestershire and Rutland Safeguarding Children Board Annual Report 1819. This is on pages 19 to 48. It is the presentation of the safeguarding report. Simon Westwood, the independent chairman of the Safeguarding Children Board, will present the report. Welcome, Simon. To note, the Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny Committee considered the annual report at its meeting on the 3rd of September, and a copy of the draft minutes is attached to the order paper marked 4. After Simon has spoken, I'll hand over to Ivan. So it's over to you, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. This is the final report of the Safeguarding Board, as the report explains that the legal process and guidance has changed, and from September 29th of this year the new Safeguarding Children arrangements come into force, and therefore the following year's report, or the report of this half year and next year, will be of the new arrangements. So this is the final report under the previous arrangements, and the reason we're stressing that is the guidance. This report reflects the guidance from 2015. The new guidance of 2018 doesn't require the same sort of detail of some of these reports. The future report and the proposals for that will be part of the discussions by safeguarding partners through the year. I just wanted to draw attention to a number of paragraphs, really. The first one is that obviously this is a statutory report and it's required to be reported to the Leader of the Council and others in paragraph 6 of the report on page 19. The new arrangements are set out, the guidance for the new arrangements are set out in paragraph 13, and these arrangements were actually considered by yourselves as Cabinet in May this year, and that's at paragraph 16. I just wanted to also bring attention to the key messages which are on page 22, paragraph 25. In general, the report finds that workers and agencies work well together across Leicestershire. There is some further work required to get an improved understanding of the thresholds for access to services. That work is underway and the board is monitoring that work, and that is being done in conjunction with Leicester City. The impact of the key service changes that have been taking place within Leicestershire still need to further review, and they are subject to internal review by the authority. And in particular, I wanted to highlight the work of the Young Persons Advisory Group. About 3 years ago, the inspection of the board identified the need to improve the engagement directly with young people and for them to influence the work of the board. Work has gone on across that period of time. We now have an established Young Persons Advisory Group which will transition into the new arrangements and will continue in the new arrangements. Those group of young people I want to thank for their input in developing that, and also for their direct approach and guidance that they've given to board members. Board members met directly with young people, heard from them their views about a number of issues. Some of the things they've risen were the issues around mental health and access to mental health for young people, the importance of getting information around threats around gangs and knife crime, and they've done some particularly good work of that, which is available on the website through the Youth Council. And that group has involved people from young people from the Youth Council, the Children in Care Council, and also across Rutland as well. Finally, I just wanted to point out that one of the comments from the Scrutiny Committee was about engagement with schools and the voluntary sector. We do have a voluntary sector reference group in the current arrangements, and that again is transferring into the new arrangements. There's some further work to be done to understand how we can best use that group of people. They clearly can't represent every voluntary organisation. That's such a wide and dispersed group, but they will do. They will help to be a conduit for the information from the board. I think that's probably all I want to say, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can you switch your light off, Simon? Very good. Ivan, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. And in moving the motion on the Green Order paper, can I thank Simon for the leadership that he's shown in the Safeguarding Children's Board, and say that some of the points that he makes in his annual report will need to be addressed by the new arrangements operating from this month. In particular, on page 39 of our report, page 15 of his, there's reference to the fact that the LSCB multi-agency audits continue to identify recurring issues with regard to plans, supervisions, assessments and recording, with no apparent progress on improving in these key areas. Now that can't stay like that. That means that the new arrangements have got to follow that through as a point, I think, of priority. But on the next page, when you look at audits from within the board, I think Cabinet members can be very reassured by the fact that there have been audits carried out on children affected by domestic abuse, sexual exploitation, sexual abuse in the family, and missing children. And missing children obviously referred to in the comments from scrutiny. I was present at the scrutiny meeting. The report was very well discussed. I'd like to pay tribute to my colleagues who are on the scrutiny group for the overview for children and families, and basically recommend this report to Cabinet. Thank you.
So you're moving the recommendations, Ivan, A and B. Thank you. Lee.
Happy to second.
Okay, we've got no one else wanting to speak. So again, thank you for the good work you've done, Simon. And all in favour, moved by Ivan, seconded by Lee. Thank you,
Chair.
thank you, Simon. Agenda item 5, Leicestershire and Rutland Safeguarding Adults Board Annual Report again, 1819, pages 49 to 76. To present the report is Fran Pearson, the independent chair of the Safeguarding Adult Board. It's your first time here, I understand, Fran, so welcome. If you present the report, then we'll ask Richard to speak. Can we also note the Adults Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee considered the report at its meeting on the 2nd of September. A copy of the draft minutes is attached to the order paper marked 5. So you'll speak first, then Fran, then I shall call Richard, who has responsibility.
Thank you. And like the children's report, this is one that needs to be brought to you as a matter of statutory responsibility. Unlike the children's chair, I've only been working here since June this year, so I'm in the slightly unusual position of presenting a report to you for a year where I wasn't here myself. And I would like to thank Robert Lake, who carried out that role during the previous year. I've principally like to draw your attention to two things. First of all, that the volume of calls and concerns around vulnerable adults continues to be high and increasing, and continues to make up an important and significant strand of the partnership workload. Secondly, I've pulled out in my introduction to this report, a small-scale survey was undertaken of residents from this county and from Rutland, asking them what helped them to feel safe. And although the survey was small, the answer came back unanimously, really, and overwhelmingly, that what people need is to have a trusted, consistent individual who they can form a relationship with and talk to and alert if they feel unsafe themselves. And I think corporately and strategically, that's very much where you come in as members, and I'm really looking forward to working with you on this very important task. Thank you.
Thank you, Fran. Richard?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I want to thank Fran for welcome to the job. Hope you enjoy it. And also the comments from scrutiny. You've covered all the items I was going to do, so I'll move the recommendation on page 1 and 2 of the Green Order paper.
Thanks, Rich. I understand you're seconding it, Lee.
Yeah, happy to second again.
No other speakers. Fran, thanks for your good work. Moved by Richard, seconded by Lee. All in favour? Thank you. Thank you, Fran. Agenda item 6, climate emergency declaration, review of the environmental strategy and action plan and immediate areas for action. This is on 77 to 90. Obviously, the report provides Cabinet with an overview of the work to be undertaken to help us meet the commitments set out in our climate change emergency declaration on the 15th of May 2019. Anne Carruthers, Director of Environment and Transport, is here to present the report. And then I think Blake is going to move it. Are you doing it, Anne, or is Joanne doing it? Okay, over to you, Anne.
Thank you, Chair. As mentioned, Council declared in May a climate emergency and committed to become carbon neutral for its own operations by 2030, to work with others and lobby government in this respect, and to help limit global warming to less than 1.5 degrees C. The report before you sets out the work that we propose to undertake to take us towards those targets. The first action will be to review our existing environment strategy and update its action plan to reflect this commitment. We will assess key areas of activity across the Council to understand what their carbon impacts are and how we might change those activities to reduce carbon, and also the associated costs with that. We'll identify short-term low regret initiatives. They're basically actions we know we can take now that will help reduce our carbon emissions. There will also be an update of our strategic plan and the Council's 5 outcomes to reflect carbon and carbon reduction, because this is a cross-cutting initiative that the whole of the Council will need to get behind and work towards in order to meet. And we will also look to learn from others. We're not the only ones making such a declaration, so there is the opportunity for us to work with other local authorities and organisations to understand how we can help. How can we help move towards that target by 2030? And finally, we'll look to engage with our businesses and communities and other stakeholders across the county. I'm sure you'll appreciate set out in the report, our carbon emissions are only a small amount, a small proportion of the county's overall carbon emissions. To deliver this activity, the report is seeking 450,000 allocation to secure more officer resource, to enable us to carry out specialist analysis of our activities and what we might want to do across those activities, and also to implement short-term actions I've mentioned just a moment ago. We'll continue to then look to explore how delivery can be facilitated across the Council, and because it is council-wide, as I've mentioned, we're looking very much at taking an approach that we took to austerity, and therefore we're having conversations with our transformation unit about how we best roll this out and embed it across the work of the County Council. The recommendations are set out in the order paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Blake?
Thank you, Leader, and I have no hesitation in moving the motion on the Green Order paper under 6. I just want to add, because I think Anne's covered many of the points, but Council did resolve to declare a climate emergency, and we have an environment strategy that takes up 2050. We're proposing to bring measures that reduce our carbon emissions to net zero by 2030. Obviously, we're moving faster We've got a good story to tell on carbon emissions. Since 2008-2009, I think the Council have reduced our own carbon emissions by about 67% and greenhouse gases overall by about 55%, and that's a positive story, but there is much more to be done. As Anne has alluded to, it isn't the sole responsibility of the Environment and Transport Department, although it is the Environment Department. We have professional officers with the requisite skills to try and lead on this. The actions cut across the whole of the Council, every single department, not least property, where they have a huge role to play in how we plan for the future development and our strategies around that. But it's hugely important, not least to the younger generation. Climate change is happening, and it's incumbent on us that we do all we can to play our part in making sure that we reduce those emissions to leave the place in a more sustainable position. So I have no hesitation in moving the motion on the Green Order Paper. Leader, thank you.
I'll formally second and call, first of all, Byron.
Yes, Leader. I mean, this is really a big change in direction of the council, because now we're having to take account of the great needs of changing out the way we do things because of this climate change threat and problem, and we've declared the emergency. We're putting £450,000 into this if we agree this motion today, basically to do all the preparation work and decide what it is we need to do in changing our policies. And that will partly finance the transformation unit, which is starting to look at this very, very carefully. I was talking to the manager of that just recently. This is a major change of direction for the council, but it's one that we're doing, and we're well placed to do it because we have control of our other activities, much better placed than, for example, other councils are. So we'll lead the way, and it'll have a full backing from the property department and also from the resources function as well. So I shall make sure of that.
Thank you, Byron. Louise?
Thank you. I think on the back of this, could we also be looking at the air quality and actually taking some action on air quality? I speak from experience in my area where we have a lot of HGVs, we've got the motorway junctions, we've got Foss Park, the Lubbersthorpe business coming in. It's a big issue in a number of areas, and I just think on the back of the climate change agenda, we should be looking at taking action on the issues we have for that.
Do you want to answer that, Anne, or Blake? Yeah, Blake?
Yeah, I can answer that and wholeheartedly agree. It's an issue that has been raised numerous times at the Environment and Transport Overview and Scrutiny Committee. My understanding is the Director of Public Health will soon be bringing a report to Cabinet on air quality management. I know that because I've been briefed and the department's been consulted on certain measures that we need to sign up to support that plan. But it is a serious issue. It does complement the climate work that we are doing, and I look forward to the Director of Public Health's report, and hopefully Cabinet can sign up to those measures too.
Thank you. Well, before we take the vote, obviously, it's worth noting this is going to cost us $450,000 just to get started. Transformation unit's going to be looking at it with the same eagle eyes that they looked at austerity, so that's going to cost us more money. But I think we should be proud to be leading the way in Leicestershire, and all we can really do is encourage others to take it as seriously as we are doing. So it was moved by Blake, seconded by myself. Can I ask for a show of hands in favour? Thank you. Seven, MTFS Strategy Refresh 91 to 104. Report sets out our overall position and updates the MTFS. Scrutiny Commission again has had a look at this matter at its meeting on the 4th of September. A copy of their draft minutes is attached to the order paper marked 7. Chris Tambini, Director of Corporate Resources, will present the report, and then Byron, as the Cabinet member, will speak. Are you doing it, Chris, or is Declan? Okay, over to you, Chris.
Yeah, this is the usual report we bring in September to kind of tee up the MTFS, which is produced over the autumn. Although the context behind pulling together this MTF is great uncertainty, much of which stems from the national position politically. And against this backdrop, I think we do need to continue to plan over the medium term, probably at the same time be a bit more nimble and change when we need to. The report was written a couple of weeks ago, and since we wrote it, we've clearly had the spending review. So if I kind of start with the funding position, the broad headline from last week's spending review is a 4.3% increase, real terms increase in funding for local government. That's clearly the most generous settlement we've had for over a decade. We don't really have the detail in terms of what that actually means for the County Council, but there's little doubt that our overall position will be better than we've currently forecast in our MTFS for next year. How much better off will depend on the formula that's used to allocate the funding. We've got no visibility on that yet, but we are expecting a consultation over the next few weeks. There's always a but with these things. So there are a few things. I've talked about the distribution. But at the same time, there's also been a delay to the fair funding review. So one thing we do know is that the existing formula in some way will be used to allocate that extra money. And we all know that that doesn't particularly favour authorities such as Leicestershire. I think probably more importantly is the fact that this is a one-year spending review, so it's only funding for next year. And a number of kind of commentators and economists have commented that probably that it's not really affordable at a national level for that generosity to continue after next year. But I'll talk a little bit about the pressures. Demand and cost pressures are increasing for the County Council, and in the current year we are forecasting an overspend. That's the first time we've forecast an in-year overspend probably in over a decade. And on top of that, we also know that the kind of medium, longer-term pressures are going to continue. We've got an ageing population, we've got big pressures in terms of children's social care and SEN. And probably you can add decarbonising the economy on top of those pressures. It's probably worth making special mention of SEND, that we are forecasting an in-year overspend this year of £6 million. The government has announced quite a generous increase in funding next year of 700 million nationally. Again, we don't know the detail of what that will mean for us, but I think we do know that it will continue to be our major pressure, and that funding won't be enough to actually offset those cost and demand increases. We will continue to make savings against that backdrop, and the appendix to this report is a list of the savings under development. We'll do more work on those over the autumn. One thing probably worth pulling out is that list is really focused on efficiency savings and extra income. There's not a lot in the way of service reductions in there, and that probably reflects the fact that we've had a decade of service reductions and there's not a lot more we can actually do. So if I was going to summarise the whole position, I think we've got a good settlement probably for next year. But over the medium and longer term, the pressure is set to continue, and we need to continue to maximise efficiencies and income and plan over the medium term.
Could you say a few words about capital?
In terms of capital, the spending review is pretty light in terms of announcements on capital, although we are expecting that there will be a series of announcements probably over the autumn, which will be probably good news for local government, maybe more announcements around transport settlements, etc. In terms of our own position around capital, we've got huge pressures on capital. We've got a growing population, and that manifests itself in terms of increasing transport infrastructure and schools. So that is a key pressure. We know we've got a shortfall in the order of £60 million on our future capital programme, and probably that is set to continue. On top of that, we are very dependent on Section 106 monies to fund the capital programme, and I think we're all aware of the risks that surround that kind of income. So again, the pressures around capital are again set to continue over the medium term.
Thank you. Byron.
Well, this is a better story than we've had to tell in previous years, because this settlement announced by the Chancellor for 1 year is certainly as good as we could hope it to be, and perhaps better than we'd rather expected it to be. It's been described in some areas of the press as Sargid's short-term fix, and I hope it doesn't just turn out to be that way, because obviously we want it to roll forward and indeed to improve after next year. But who knows what the future is? Politically, we can't tell the future more than a week ahead in this country at the moment, or even a day or two ahead. So we are where we are. Fortunately, in this council, we are better placed than in other councils. I was told about another council yesterday, and the whole county has got 1,900 million pounds of debt. Can you imagine what that's going to do to their future? It will cost them something like 190 million pounds a year to service that debt every year, straight off their revenue budget. We've got 263 million pounds of debt, which still hangs over us, and that is always bears down on me, because it takes 27 million a year off our revenue budget currently. So we're not in the business of running away and saying austerity is over, we can spend, as some might judge. We have to be very cautious. However, having said all that, it does enable us to now look to plug a few holes, and in next year I'm pretty confident there won't be any further service reductions. And that's something we've not been able to say for quite a long time. So we will be able to do a lot of things better than we previously thought that we'd be able to do. We will be able to put some extra money into some areas of service which we've had to cut back in the past, where now problems are starting to arise. And hopefully this time next year we'll get a settlement which will be at least as good as this one, and I hope a good deal better. So it's a complex report. It's worth reading it very, very carefully, and I hope those of you who are interested in these matters do. So I commend it to the Cabinet.
Thank you, Richard. Oh, thank you, Richard. Shepherd, that is.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to second that, and I think it's really important to note that both Chris and Byron have gone to a great deal of trouble to present a balanced and accurate picture for us to convey to all our residents. Yes, there is the good news. Yes, there is the one-year settlement. Yes, that does help. But, and as Chris said, there's always a but, we don't yet know the detail of the settlement. It will, unfortunately, be based on the existing formula, and we don't, of course, know what the year after will bring. So, not to sound sort of mealy-mouthed about it, it genuinely is good news and a relief. But there has to be that but emphasised, and I'm really pleased that Chris and Bart have made that point clearly, and I'd like really to stress it myself. In doing so, Chairman, happy, of course, to second.
Very good. No other speakers. Thanks for your good work, Chris. Thanks to you, Byron, and you, Richard, for your good work. All in favour? Thank you. Agenda item 8, Corporate Asset Investment Fund Annual Performance Report 18-19 and the strategy for 19 to 23. These are on pages 103 to 152. The paper sets out the performance of the Corporate Asset Investment Fund to date and seeks our approval of the revised Corporate Asset Investment Fund strategy, which sets out our approach to future investments. Again, Scrutiny Commission had a look at this last Wednesday. A draft minute is attached to the order paper marked 8. John Pennett, who's the head of property, I think you're going to present the report, John? Okay, so John's going to present the report then. Byron, again, has responsibility for these matters, and I'll call him first. John?
If I just say a few opening remarks and then I'll pass
Chris.
over to John. If you go back to 2014, when we produced the 4-year MTFS, it looked kind of more or less impossible to close the gap, and that was when the Council Cabinet decided to set up the Corporate Asset Investment Fund. I mean, this is a positive report, and it shows some really positive progress. If you look at our overall approach, is we have taken a fairly cautious approach to this. So if you look at some authorities, they've gone from kind of investments of 0 to over £1 billion in that kind of period of time. Clearly, we've gone to about 140 million, which is a lot less. And our cautious approach is based on a really sensible approach to due diligence, etc. And just picking up on Byron's comments earlier, which isn't brought out in the report, we've done that without borrowing. So although we have made some good progress and we've made some significant investments, we haven't borrowed to finance that. So we haven't kind of geared the council up and introduced risks around financing. I'll pass over to John now.
Okay, thank you. You'll see in paragraphs 23 through to 29 an overview of the performance of the fund. Last year, I was able to report an increase in the value of the fund from 63.5 million to 102, an increase of 38.5 million. This year, I can report yet another substantial increase in the value of the fund from 102 million to 145 million. That's £43 million worth of increase, or 30%, and the income has increased to 7 million. The property element of the fund is yielding a total return, that's capital and income, of 12%, which, considering the national average of the IPD database for the UK is 6%, shows that the fund is being well and prudentially managed. The report goes into some detail on some of the ongoing and planned developments, shows that we're on site, about to actually complete at Apollo Court in Colville, got Airfield Farm at Market Harborough, and the large office scheme at Lucep, which is due to complete next July, are all on time and on budget, as well as the planned developments going forward, the major residential scheme at Lutterworth East, the environmental scheme at Poole Farm, and the newly permitted scheme at Melton Mowbray. The final point to make is the fund made an acquisition last year of the Citroën car dealership in Leicester, for 2.95 million. It's generating a rent of 192,000, which is a yield of 6.5%, which is absolutely in line with what the fund is seeking to achieve. And the fund also raised £2.5 million in capital disposals. I recommend the report as noted. Thank you.
Very good. Byron?
Yes, I mean, this is a very good news report, and I commend the director and the head of property who's put so much effort into getting this our property portfolio in such a good order and to expand it to the degree that it is expanding. For those people who wonder where we get the money from to expand it, it comes from money which we have to set aside for future liabilities, not least the repayment of debt in the future, which is always something that I remind people of. And by putting it into high quality property and not take undue risk, and there's a lot of information in this report about not taking too much risk, because you hear lots of stories of organisations that have taken reckless decisions with property and then they come to grief. Well, we hopefully will not come to grief, because we only invest in very high quality property, and also property which is relevant to the aims and aspirations of the county council. And we also take account of climate change issues, of course, in all our investments as well. So it's an excellent report. I'm very happy to move the motion on the Green Order paper.
Thank you, Byron. Richard Shepherd first.
I'm going to second that, Chairman, and to emphasise this is a really good example of the Council being both prudent and also proactive in a way which fundamentally benefits people in the county. So I'm very pleased indeed to support it, to second it, Chairman.
Thank you, Richard. Richard Blunt.
Thank you, Chairman. I just, as a member of the Corporate Asset Investment Fund, I just want to put on record John's excellent work. It isn't easy to strike a balance in the public sector between seeking a good return and an acceptable approach to risk. And each time a report comes forward from an investment, it's always a pleasure to read, because you manage to understand the pressures that we're under as politicians and the need that we put on you to make a financial return. And you do an excellent job, and long may you continue.
Very good. Praise indeed from Rich. Moved by Byron, seconded by Richard Shepherd. All in favour? Thank you. Item 9, Potential Strategic Development Area, M69 Junction 2. This is on pages 153 to 164. The report details proposals to develop a strategic development area adjacent to the M69 Junction 2 to the west of Stony Stanton and Sapcut. We've received comments from the local member Maggie Wright and from David Bill, who is not a local member, a copy of which are attached to the order paper marked 9A and 9B. Maggie has requested to speak on the matter, and I think, Maggie, you're going to come up, Maggie, and then you're going to speak first, and then John will talk us through the report. So, Maggie, over to you.
Good morning. I have been asked to speak to Cabinet members regarding this agenda item by my residents, the parish councils of Stony Stanton and Sapcote, and district councillors who represent the division. Some of the representatives are indeed here with me today. Many residents are now aware of this proposal through media coverage, but are very disappointed that there has been no direct consultation with them or myself as the division representative on this, or indeed the HIF bid. I am named in the published report but had no influence on its contents. Residents are already concerned by the proposed national rail freight interchange application, which is on their doorstep, which is now compounded by the LCC ambitions. The impact of the LCC proposals, even without the rail freight interchange, would be enormous, and the local community, therefore, it is only reasonable for consultation to take place. After all, the county hold these land assets on behalf of the residents, and it is inconceivable that residents' voices should not be heard even at this early stage. And I quote, "So much is happening without us having a say." Consultation and transparency are seen as essential factors, but are so far absent. I have a very active community within my division, which is demonstrated by the progress of delivering a collective neighbourhood plan. Residents want a say in shaping their area. These proposals will obviously be subject to the Blaby District Council's local plan process, and normal planning procedures will apply. It is acknowledged consultation will take place as part of this procedure, but at a much later date. For these reasons, it is important to reiterate that these two villages of Sapcote and Stony Stanton have already exceeded their housing numbers, and Blaby District Council have a good 5-year land supply. I know we have to make provision for housing, but Blaby District Council is taking extensively more numbers than others. To conclude, I would wish to highlight a particular area of immediate concern, but must say there are indeed several. The concern relates to areas of separation and individual settlement identity. These are seen as a high priority amongst residents and is referenced in the Blaby Growth Plan. No consideration is given to this in the report. This proposal could ultimately see the joining of the two villages. Green wedges, green lungs, and a clear band of separation is essential for my residents. I recognise it will be several years before any formal plans are presented, and therefore early engagement, as suggested above, will help to shape decision making. We all have a duty to protect the distinct character of our local communities, whilst recognising the need to provide housing. I therefore request a lead officer engages on a regular formal basis to update and brief my parish councils, my district councillors and myself on this matter. Information can then be cascaded to residents and partner parishes also impacted within the Foss villages. I thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. A very good speech, very good letter. I entirely agree with you that green lungs, green wedges and separation between the villages is of paramount importance. Over to you, John.
Thank you. The land that surrounds Sapcote and Stony Stanton, the County Council owns 62 hectares there, 153 acres. And Blaby, as has been mentioned, are undertaking a local plan review at the moment, and that they're at the very early stage, the issues and options, which also involves the call for sites. This obviously helps Blaby understand the availability of land for strategic housing in the area. And along with other landowners, we have put forward our land for consideration. This will help them assess the overall quantum of strategic housing land in the district. Discussions with Blaby District Council officers over the last year and a half have shown that a strategic housing scheme in this area will be something they may support, and like us are keen to ensure that any development that comes forward protects existing residents and will be brought forward in a well-planned, well thought out, and has the right infrastructure to ensure that any new community is developed and not just a bland housing estate. Development, in all probability, is coming here, and as a minor but important landowner, we as a council have the opportunity to shape what development comes forward and when. And I would like the opportunity to liaise with the other landowners in conjunction with and collaboration with Blaby District Council officers to help deliver and shape that development. There are elements that are outside of LCC control, such as has been mentioned, the Hinckley National Rail Freight Interchange, which is being sent to the Planning Inspectorate later this year. As a important but minor landowner, we cannot stop other farm owners from signing promotion agreements with private developers. However, our land is important. As has been mentioned, the area separation between Stony Stanton, Sapcott and the new development to the east of the M69, we're at an early stage. We can ensure that nothing happens that impacts those villages without our understanding and approval. There are no done deals. We are at an early stage, but if the Cabinet wishes the Council to help drive and deliver sustainable development in this area, there will be the start of detailed consultation and engagement with residents, parish councils, district officers and councillors, as well as members. And once an acceptable way forward or options for way forward have been crystallised, intend bringing back to Cabinet in November. And so I'd ask that the recommendation is approved on page 153. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I'm happy to move the recommendations and to reassure the residents. I think it's kind of lucky that we own the green wedge, the green lungs, the area of separation, whatever you call it, and being able to be in there to help deliver and shape whatever development Blaby think is appropriate. It's useful that we are actually in there, because if it was a third-party developer, they wouldn't have the same views on the area of separation and green lungs, green wedges that we've got. So I'm happy to move the recommendations based on that, and I think it'll be good and will help you moving forward. Before I take you, Maggie, I just need to make sure we get this seconded. So, Byron?
Yes. First of all, let me say I recognise the concerns that Maggie has raised, and also the concerns that I know are there in the communities as well, and represented by the councillors from the parish councils and districts who are here today. The point about the consultation is that this is the early stage in which we could actually open the public debate upon this, and this Cabinet report actually does just that. And I think John has made very clear the way we've set about it, and the fact that the residents should take comfort from the fact that we're involved, and this is not entirely in the hands of other developers, because we will have some degree of control of how it's done, if it is done at all. Of course, it comes down in the end to Blaby District Council, who are the planning authority, and will have to decide whether to include this area in their roll forward of their local plan. What we'll be doing is at this stage is putting it forward. And it might be that they go somewhere else, but they have to make their own decisions. But if they do put it in, and it seems quite likely that they will, then we'll be in control and be able to meet all these issues which have been raised, and ensure that if there is development there, it's done in the best possible way, and of course always in full consultation with all the residents and all the elected councillors in the area, and assure you that will be done. So happy to second the motion.
Thank you. Before we, yes, I'll take you, Louise. So I'm coming back to you, Maggie. I've not forgotten you. Louise?
Hello. I'd just like to say that whilst this is early consultation, early start, I think sometimes the impact of these papers going out in public without that communication initially with members, etc., is where sometimes things flare. So I would just like, the impact of papers to be considered, and for communication with members to be done, really.
Louise has mentioned that to me before, John. Can you answer that? Or
in terms of the circulation, we are just advised as to whom the papers should go. but in future we will just make sure that that has been well thought through. Okay.
Thanks for that, John. Maggie, back to you.
I'd just like to come back and say I very much welcome the offer of a detailed consultation, which I'd very much like to take up as soon as possible.
Okay, Maggie, we want to do our best to help you, for certain. Been moved by me, seconded by Byron. All in favour? Thank you. Thank you, Maggie. Agenda item 10, mainstream and special educational needs home to school transport policies, outcome of the judicial review. This is on pages 165 to 170. The report provides an update on the implementation of the Council's mainstream home to school transport policy and SEN transport policy following the outcome of the judicial review. Anne, are you going to present it, Anne? So Anne's going to present it, and then after Anne's done, I'm going to call Blake.
Thank you, Leader. Cabinet will recall it approved a new mainstream and SEN home-to-school transport policy in March 2018. The main implications of that policy were to move to personal travel budgets for post-16 pupils, a 50% contribution for low-income exemptions, and a £150 grant for mainstream post-16 students and low-income or rurally isolated students. A JR judicial review was submitted on that policy and was heard in Birmingham in April this year. The claim was on the basis of unlawfully discriminating on the grounds of age and indirectly discriminating on grounds of disability under the Equalities Act and the Human Rights Acts, and failing to comply with the public sector equality duty. While the Justice informed us he'd hoped to deliver his judgment by the end of May this year, when this didn't actually come forward, I, in liaison with the Cabinet Member for Environment and Transport, took the decision to suspend implementation of that new policy, which was due now, basically September 2019, for this academic year. The reason I took that decision was to avoid the scenario of a late judgment coming out over the summer and us not being able to comply and put the transport in place for September, the new academic year. This still, however, left us with a challenging situation whereby we really had 6 weeks to put in place transport, which we normally plan for over a 4 or 5 month period. However, we wanted to give parents that certainty that they actually would have transport arrangements come the new academic year. The financial implications of this pause are the 420,000 savings under the MTFS we were due to deliver with this new policy. The majority of it could not be realised at this point in time. The pause, however, still allowed the implementation of the 50% low-income contribution and the £150 grant, because that was not subject to the judicial review. So that has gone ahead at this point in time. The actual judgment from the judicial review, we received that mid-July, and that actually upheld for our case. So in effect, we can implement from September 2020 that policy. However, the claimant has sought leave to appeal. So we will obviously watch that carefully, and pending that appeal, whether that goes ahead or not, we'll actually have to look at any outcome of that, or if it doesn't go ahead, we're at liberty to implement the new policy come September 2020. The only other matter I draw Cabinet's attention to is that the judge was slightly critical of the clarity around how we actually calculated personal travel budgets. So I would certainly reassure Cabinet that in implementing the policy, we will look to improve clarity around how personal travel budgets are calculated, so people have an understanding about the value and what they will actually receive under that mechanism. Thank you, Chair.
Blake.
Thank you, Leader. And just before I speak, noting that I turned up to the meeting slightly late due to traffic, can I just make sure there is a declaration of interest? It's not a pecuniary one, but obviously the usual personal interest in that. Members of my family are involved with the taxi company, but it is a personal interest and non-pecuniary. With that, Leader, can I just support the comments made by the Director. I'm pleased that the policy is being found lawful on all accounts. I note that the family that brought the legal challenge in the first instance is seeking leave for appeal of the decision, and we wait and see what that actually means. But the purpose of the report to Cabinet today is to bring you up to date with the outcome of that review, which the Director has just done, make you aware of our next steps, which includes a review of the calculation of personal transport budgets. And finally, can I just add, and we spoke about it under the MTFS report, I note the government's announcement that there'll be £700 million extra nationally for SEN. What we need to work out is if any of that money will be made available to helping authorities like ourselves support the transportation of SEN children and pupils. We do not know that at the moment. It's no secret that there are immense pressures on our budgets regarding SEN transport at the moment. They are increasing year on year. But we have a policy here that I'm told, I'm briefed, that there are a lot of students and families out there that voluntarily take up personal transport budgets, and it works very, very well for them. We note that this is a change to the usual offer that the Council has provided in previous years. This will be implemented, this new policy, in 2020, as the Director said. But in the meantime, I welcome the news that the policy has been found lawful, and I commend the motion on the order paper to Cabinet.
Thank you. Ivan?
Seconding the motion on the Green Order paper, I'm going to await with interest whether or not leave to appeal is actually granted. I wonder if the Director could give us any indication as to how long that process might take.
Anne?
Unfortunately, actually, we don't have an idea how quickly the Court of Appeal will hear that and then come to its decision. But, you know, we are constantly talking to our legal representation to make sure we're updated on that. Unfortunately, I can't give you a timescale at the moment.
Okay, moved by Blake, seconded by Ivan. All in favour? Thank you, Anne. You staying for the canal, Anne? Okay, so potential transfer of part of the Ashby Canal, 171 to 180. This report seeks Cabinet's approval to progress the transfer of part of the Ashby Canal to the Ashby Canal Association. We've received comments from Sean Sheehan, who's the local member. These are attached to the order paper marked 11. Joe Gill, Assistant Director of ENT, is here to present the report, and then Blake, as the lead member, will speak. So over to you, Joe.
Thank you. The purpose of the report is to seek Cabinet approval to apply to the Secretary of State for Environment to transfer historical powers that have been granted to the County Council under a Transport and Works Act order to the Ashby Canal Association, also known as the ACA. And if approved by government, we would then look to transfer the associated canal and land between Snareston and Measham to the ACA. In the body of the report, we do set out the County Council's historic relationship with the Ashby Canal project, which we have led on since 1994, but predates that and has a long-standing activity in that part of the county. It also sets out our relationship with the key stakeholders, what restoration has taken place to date and how that's been funded. And it also sets some context around how and why the ACA have increasingly argued that with increasing pressures on council resources and our limited access to some funding sources, how they might be better placed to lead on restoring that section of canal that's being discussed today. In putting forward the proposal, officers did try and consider if there were other options that might be available, but in short, either retaining it for the County Council or transferring to a third party are the only realistic options that are available. Within that context, officers have looked at any land values associated with the transfer and considered all the historic legal issues and obligations, which are quite extensive. With that, we included seeking some external counsel's advice, opinion on the proposal, and they've advised that the proposed transfer would not contravene the council's position. Just in terms of consultation, DEFRA, as part of our discussions that we've had with them, stipulated that a public consultation be undertaken as part of any application for transfer. And the details of the 6-week public consultation which has been carried out are set out in the report, but we're broadly supported by all that responded. If I might also highlight that as part of that consultation period, the Environment and Transport Scrutiny Committee also considered the proposal at its meeting in June, and it received representation from Councillors Sheehan and Harrison, who supported the transfer. Councillor Sheehan also did ask that the Council review its representation on the Ashby Canal Trust, another stakeholder that's involved in the canal's restoration, and was reassured or assured that it will continue to be supported by officers. Lastly, regarding risks or possible risks, these are set out in point 27 of the report. And I think really I would just highlight that the key one being that the Secretary of State may refuse or be unable to grant consent for the transfer, but that's something which this proposal would seek to resolve. Finally, it's just to assure Cabinet that whilst this proposal would, if approved, lead to the Council relinquishing its responsibilities for this section of canal restoration, it forms only part of a wider project, because there are other land parcels which the Council remains committed to seeing restored, which brings me to the recommendations on the order paper. Thank you.
Very good. Blake?
Yes, I'm happy to move the motion on the green order paper under 11. This is actually quite a good story for us, because the County Council has led on the restoration since about 1994. The proposal here, which is to seek agreement of the Secretary of State to transfer the land to the Trust, that will be in a better position to garner funding to see the fruition of the project, is a good one. It has wide support. I'd like to thank the Environment and Scrutiny body who offered broad support towards the proposal, and I understand the consultation that was undertaken between the 9th of May and the back end of June, that received about 95% support for the proposal too. So on that basis, Leader, I will move the motion on the green order paper. Thank you.
Good, and I'm super happy to second it. I'm seeing Andrew Bridgen on the 18th of October, assuming he's still a Member of Parliament by then, and assuming we've got a Secretary of State, I'll be pressing him to deal with it as fast as we can, because it's gone on long enough. Okay, moved by Blake, seconded by me. All in favour? Thank you. Integrated Care System. This is 181 to 200. This report advises the Cabinet on the implications for the Council of the introduction by NHS England of integrated care systems. The Chief's going to speak to it, then I'm going to say something. Over to you, John.
Thank you. This follows a report to Cabinet on the NHS long-term plan in April this year. Integrated Care Systems, or ICSs, is the latest name for NHS policy introduced in 2015. It began life, you may remember, as Sustainability and Transformation Plans, or STPs, and is now in its fourth name, one per year. Since 2015, I've probably spent more time than I should trying to make sense of it all, but it has become increasingly clear to me that it is an inconvenient truth for NHS England that local authorities manage social care and public health. I think you can see that in the little which is written down about ICSs, pointing more to how the NHS operates within its own structures, and the reference that the NHS will want what they call a clear expectation that a local authority will want to be part of an ICS. The difficulty which this report highlights is the County Council cannot commit to that without knowing what is the NHS's expectation, and a proper answer to the question, exactly what is an ICS? I'm afraid I can't tell you. There are three main reasons, therefore, to bring this report to Cabinet now and to put the matter back to the NHS. First, the absence of that clarity and the implications for the County Council as a statutory body in its own right as a provider for social care and public health services. Second, the NHS proposal now to set up a partnership group involving the chairs of the three health and wellbeing boards in Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, but dominated by NHS members and advised by the NHS. This feels to me to have all the hallmarks of a talking shop, and in any event premature until we have answers to the questions. The third point is that the existing circular conversations with the NHS have got to a point where we are running the risk of those getting in the way of and frustrating all the good work which is done on integrating health and care services, led by Cheryl Davenport, involving adult social care and public health, which is regularly reported and well received by the Health and Wellbeing Board. So the recommendations reflect the Council's concerns, but also our commitment to the integration of health and care services, plus a suggestion as to how we can help the NHS by defining place in their three-tier system. Those recommendations are on the Green Order paper.
Thank you. I'll move them and place on record my thanks to you, John, for the amount of work you do trying to make sense of the NHS. So I'll move the recommendations and call Lee.
Yeah, happy to second. I think the recommendation that we await clarification from the NHS as to what they would actually mean in practice. I think that's quite clear, and I think we need that. So happy to second.
Very good. No other speakers. All in favour? Thank you. Agenda item 13, Leicestershire Minerals and Waste Local Plan 2019 to 2031. This is on pages 201 to 208. The report advises members of the findings of the inspectors appointed to examine our Minerals and Waste Plan, seeks approval for a revised version prior to its submission to County Council. Again, it's worth noting the Environment and Transport Overview and Scrutiny Committee considered the report at its meeting on the 5th of September. A copy of the draft minute is attached to the order paper marked 13. Nick Thomas, who's the head of Planning, Historic and Natural Environment, is here to present the report. Over to you, Nick.
Thank you, Leader. This report, yes, relates to the adoption of the Minerals and Waste Local Plan. The plan is provided in full in a separate appendix pack, along with the inspector's report, which sets out the findings of the independent examination into the plan. The plan has taken over 6 years to reach this stage, and it's a statutory document that all local authorities have to have an up-to-date plan, and it will replace a number of historic documents as set out in the report. When adopted, this plan will form the statutory Minerals and Waste Local Plan for Leicestershire. It will guide the working of minerals across the county and form of waste management development across the county up until 2031. The plan has been subject to cross-boundary discussions with stakeholders and extensive consultation over many years, including site operators and local residents, adjoining local authorities, district and parish councils, and also relevant statutory consultees. This consultation took place throughout all stages of the plan, which began in 2013, and it was repeated on 8 separate occasions. The examination itself took place in October 2018, where 2 inspectors held hearings into the plan. The plan was very well received, with very few modifications, and the changes that are suggested are set out in the report that's attached. You'll see that the inspectors found the plan to be sound, and the modifications that were proposed were subject to consultation earlier this year. Finally, just in relation to the Environment and Transport Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which considered the report last week, the committee welcomed the plan and were broadly supportive. There was concerns raised about unconventional hydrocarbons, which is the extraction of shale gas. And you'll see from the notes of that meeting that there's a requirement for all minerals plans to have in place policies to deal with the extraction of shale gas, and that policies need to be positively prepared. This doesn't necessarily mean that the County Council will receive planning applications for this type of development, or that if it was received that it would be granted. The process would be that such applications would be considered in the normal way through Development Control and Regulatory Board, and they would have the powers to impose conditions as appropriate. There's also controls through the Health and Safety Executive to deal with any underground impacts from that type of development. I'll leave it there. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Forgot to switch my own light off there, but never mind. Okay, I'll move the motion on the order paper. The inspectors found it to be sound, which in planning speak is considered to be good. So I'll move it, and then I think, Richard, you're seconding it, aren't you, Richard? Anybody else? Moved and seconded. All in favour? Thank you, Nick. Good work. Leicestershire County Council Community Safety Strategy 19 to 21. This is on pages 209 to 222. Seeks approval to consult stakeholders on the strategy. Jane Moore, Director of Children and Family Services. Or is it you, Chris? Who's going to do it? Chris? Or you, Jane? Jane, okay, so Jane's going to speak to it, then I'm going to call Ivan. Jane?
Thank you, Chair. So the report sets out the duties placed on local authorities and other named statutory responsible agencies in relation to crime and disorder. It also outlines our current approach and also seeks approval to consult on the draft Leicestershire County Council Community Safety Strategy. So just by way of reminder, the County Council does have a statutory duty under the Crime and Disorder Act to work with other named authorities and agencies to reduce crime and disorder. By way of background, the duty for the agencies to work together to reduce crime and disorder does arise from Section 17 of the Crime and Disorder Act, and the local authority or Leicestershire County Council is named as one of the responsible authorities in the Act. The Leicestershire Safer Communities Strategy Board is the responsible board for coordinating the work between Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, and also is responsible for identifying the county-wide priorities. The board is chaired by the County Council's Cabinet Lead Member for Community Safety, who's also the County Council Cabinet Lead Member for Children and Families. And the board oversees and coordinates the implementation and delivery of the community safety partnership priorities. We've set out in the paragraphs 13 the key responsibilities of the board, and also outlined on the next page some detail around the role of the police and crime commissioners. So in 2012, the landscape in relation to community safety did significantly change and became somewhat more complex with the introduction for two-tier authorities of the Police and Crime Commissioner, who now have a responsibility for the oversight of not just the local police force, but introducing that force-wide police and crime plans and some responsibilities in relation to community safety partnerships. So recognising that there may be some crossover on the role of police and crime commissioners and county councils in two-tier arrangements, the regulations in 2012 introduced a requirement for a county-level strategy groups, but also the introduction of the community safety agreement and partnership plan, and we've attached Leicestershire's to this paper. Just to note as well, in paragraph 18, we have detailed the role of the Leicestershire County Council Community Safety Team. So not only do they coordinate the work of the Safer Community Strategy Board, but they also lead on a number of key areas for the county around antisocial behaviour, prevent hate and domestic abuse. So we are proposing that the draft community safety strategy is subject to consultation both with the Scrutiny Commission and partners who form part of the Safer Community Strategy Board, and that consultation takes place for 8 weeks on the 16th of September. Thank you.
Great. Ivan?
Thank you, Leader. And in submitting the motion on the Green Order paper, we are going to have the outcome of that consultation brought back to us on the 17th of December, and I look forward to receiving that.
And I'll formally second. Nobody else to speak. All in favour? Thank you. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Chris. Corporate Parenting Strategy is agenda item 15, 2019 to 2022, pages 223 to 244. Again, this seeks approval to consult stakeholders on a draft corporate parenting strategy. So, Jane, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to request Cabinet's approval to consult on the draft corporate parenting strategy that sets out the Council's statutory duties and corporate parenting responsibilities for our children in care and care leavers. So by way of background, when a child comes into the care of Leicestershire, the County Council does become the corporate parent to those children. And that term refers to that collective responsibility of the Council, both for elected members and employees and partner agencies, to provide the best possible care, opportunities and safeguarding for the children for whom we have responsibility. There are 7 corporate parenting principles that were introduced by the Children and Social Work Act in 2017, and we must have regard whenever we exercise a function in relation to must have regard to these whenever we exercise a function in relation to looked after children or care leavers. So the corporate parenting principles are intended to secure a better approach to fulfilling our existing functions around our looked after children and care leavers. And the corporate parenting strategy is the framework by which we can deliver those principles. The strategy itself sets out not just our commitment to children, but that commitment to inspire, support and enable the children in our care and care leavers to be ambitious and successful. And it describes our role for these current 613 children we have in our care and 229 care leavers. It also includes reference to the promise that we made to our children in care and care leavers, and the commitment that both the local authority and its partners have to provide the best possible support, guidance and care to those children. The strategy also sets out the clear roles for elected members and officers of the Council, including the statutory responsibilities of the Cabinet Lead Member for Children and Families and the Director of Children and Family Services. And it also ensures that the voice of children in care and care leavers is heard and responded to. The strategy also makes reference and includes the role that was proposed through the 5-member panel on corporate parenting of the 3 member champions relating to education, training and work, accommodation, housing and health. So we're proposing that consultation on this strategy takes place with all key stakeholders, including our children and young people in care, their families and our partners and elected members. And as part of the consultation, the draft strategy will be submitted to the Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 5th of November. Thank you.
Very good, very important document. Over to you, Ivan.
Thank you, Leader. And when the final document comes back to us, we will try and make sure that my photograph doesn't appear beside Jane's name and my signature doesn't appear beside her. We do work in very good close association, but not to the point of exchanging identities in that way. This is really important. All joking aside, this is really important. In many councils, elected members do not fulfil their corporate parenting role. I don't want that to be the case for Leicestershire. That's why we had the 5-member panel. We know we're going to get Ofsted again, maybe very soon, and there may be some comment from that inspection in terms of how we discharge this. We are going to get the report back on the 17th of December, and I look forward to receiving it.
Thank you. Louise?
Thank you. I think, you know, obviously members and officers have to take this responsibility very seriously. It's an important part of our role. And it lays out, the draft lays out the requirements of us all in this. So I'm happy to support and to second.
I agree with both of you. This is a strategy is very important. If we're to take corporate parenting seriously, which we do, we want our children to be, I think the expression used was ambitious and successful, and that's as good as any parent wants for their own children, so we should want it for the ones we look after. Moved by Ivan, seconded by Louise. All in favour? Thank you. Thank you, Jane. (16) Local Code of Corporate Governance 245 to 268 seeks our approval for revised legal code of corporate governance prior to submission to the next County Council meeting. The Corporate Governance Committee considered the revised code at its meeting on the 26th of July and recommended that it be submitted to Cabinet and then to Council for full approval. Nigel Jones, Head of Internal Audit and Insurance, is here to present the report, and then I'm going to call... Neil, sorry, my bad reading, not getting your name wrong. So Neil's going to speak, then Byron. Neil.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So I'm presenting this report, joint report on behalf of the Directors of Law and Governance and the Directors of Corporate Resources. Part B of the report explains that the 2016 revised SIPFA and SOLAS Delivering Good Governance Framework sets the standards for local authority governance in the United Kingdom, and it recognises that authorities should be able to develop their own governance arrangement, and one size does not fit all. So what that does is it allows the County Council to review and develop its own unique approach whilst demonstrating that it conforms to the framework's 7 core principles and associated sub-principles. The Council's approach to corporate governance is summarised in Section 2 of the Appendix, which is the main code, and it informs how we have tested our governance arrangements against the revised local code. The local code has been developed from gaining a wide range of information and assurances from the Council's directors and corporate functions, and it now reflects the Council's own up-to-date governance arrangements and contains references to specific policies, procedures, behaviours and actions and values by which the Council is controlled and governed. The local code will continue to be developed biennially, and along with the principles contained within the framework, have been applied to the preparation of the Council's annual governance statement, which supports the audited statement of accounts for the financial year 2018-19. Both documents will be viewed on the Council's website. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Very good, very succinct, Neil. Over to you, Byron.
Yes, I think Neil and the team have done a very good job in updating this. We have to do this periodically, and it's important for the protection of the public that we have a very sound scheme in place. So I'm very happy to move the motion on the Green Order paper that we adopt it.
Richard Shepherd.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it's an important document. I'm happy to second the motion.
No other speakers? All in favour? Thank you, Neil. Agenda item 17, items referred from overview scrutiny. We have none. Item 18, any items which I've decided to take as urgent. We have none. So that concludes the public part of the meeting. So if we have public here, no, we can move on. So I've got to move the motion first, haven't I? Yeah. So 19 is the exclusion of the press and public. I move that under Section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded for the following items of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act.